Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the start of your second week in 100 Club. We've got Wednesday coming round again already. So we're going to continue with our football theme today. We've been looking at analysing football and how I go about it, and maybe you'll pick up an approach that you're happy with while we're doing that. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to open up the football trading ebook. Some of you may have it, some of you may not. And we're going to go through some of the things in that, some of the strategies and what is in the book, and just pick out some of the best bits of it and go through it and have a discussion about it. Then we're going to go and have a look at maybe Bet365, and I'll show you how I use this website to analyse some games that are on, and we'll see if we've got anything happening. So there's quite a few games on here, things like this one. We've got Grampus and Osaka. Couple of goals, but we've only had a couple of shots. So I'll show you how I use all that. So there's loads of games there we'll be able to have a look at later. But for now, I'll go and get this PDF open. So are you guys able to see this for me? Just let me know. If you can see, I'm sure you can. Football trading ebook. All right, so this is the football trading ebook. So we're just going to go through it and I'll show you what's in it and look at some of the stuff around analysing football. So I wrote this one in 2016, but I've updated it for 2020, and we'll have a look. So it's just obviously a bit of an introduction, but then we cover analysis, strategy, risk management, discipline, how to obtain value, the types of football trade or types of football to trade. It looks at Euro tournaments, World Cup, and things to consider when selecting a trade. So we're going to go through that together this morning. Then we can have a look at some different strategies to finish off, bit of staking, averaging, and then the conclusion. So we'll just skim through it and see how it goes. It's just a bit of an introduction there to read, nothing for us to worry about. Looking at analysis. So obviously with analysis, it's not anything too great. All you can really do is look at head-to-head, what's happened this season and what's happened last season. And it's going to vary from trader to trader. There's some guys that do what I do, which is look at mainly this season and last season and then the head-to-head. Then there's others that go on historical price data. So what they'll do is, this is a new way of analysing and something that I'm going to start looking into and see if there's any merit in it. But what they do is they look at the price of an event in a game before the game. So let's just say, I'll go to a game in a minute and show you, but let's say we've got over 2.5 goals at even money for a game tonight. The way they analyse that is they'll go and look at maybe the last 5 years of data for that team where matches they've played in, the over 2.5 has started at that price, and they might go 5 ticks either way. So they might count all games between 1.95 and 2.1. So they'll say to their database, show me all matches where this team played and the starting price of the over 2.5 was between 195 and 210. And then that'll filter out those games. And then they'll go and look at how many of those games ended up going over. So if you looked at that and it ended up, 65% of games in that price bracket did in fact go over, then you've probably got a great back bet. If it turned out to be 35% or 40% or even, up to 45% of games, then you think, well, no, it doesn't happen as often as the price suggests, and it would be a lay bet. So we might have a look at doing something like that down the track. I don't have those sort of databases. That's not how I trade, but I've got access to them, so I can go and get them, and we can do some research on it and see how we go. So when I'm looking at analysis, the typical things that I do that need to be considered are looking at, do both sides need to win, or does a draw suit one of them? So you've got an example in the book of when Man City just needed a draw on the final day of 2016 against Swansea to secure a Champions League place. And that's what they got. they just got the draw. So Buckingham would have been a risk. They didn't have to win. Whereas Manchester United knew that they had to win their final game to have any chance. So there was no way they were going to sit on a draw. Right to the last minute, they would have thrown all 11 men forward to try and get the goal. So you do get a lot of that in the last few games of the season. So obviously the Premier League's been decided, but the Champions League places haven't. And we saw last night with Arsenal and Leicester both trying to achieve the Champions League places. Tottenham obviously needed to win the other night, which they did. And then we're going to get some real interesting games down the bottom of the league as well for the relegation spots. That's going to get really interesting over the last 5 games of the season. So you look in La Liga, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, were all within 2 points of each other on the final day. So obviously all of those sides are trying to win. But then you get the interesting games like in the Championship where you've got the playoffs and stuff where it's over 2 legs. And you may not need to win the first game. If you're away, you might be quite happy to take a draw and just sit on that and then go home and try and win it at home. So you've just really got to consider the type of game that you're playing. You know, an FA Cup game, if it's a draw after 85 minutes, teams may not be trying to win. They might think, you know what, we'll just go for the draw here. We'll take the extra time, we'll regroup and we'll have a look. Then you've also got to consider teams that have been relegated have nothing to play for. So I think we've got a couple of them tonight. So then you've got the teams that have got sort of nothing to play for. They're done. Like, you know, we were saying last night, Crystal Palace, you know, that they're sort of mid-table. They're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to be relegated. But Chelsea, you know, they had a lot to play for. So it's all dependent on the type of game that you're trading. And then you get to Euro Championships and World Cups. You know, there's a lot of low-scoring games in the first round because nobody wants to lose the first game of the tournament. Puts you right on the back foot. So they'd rather draw than get beat. So all aspects of the match have to be taken into consideration. So you ask yourself some questions. Do they need to win? Are they trying to win or is a draw okay? Are they playing their best team? You know, you might have a side that's already secured Champions League spots and they've got an FA Cup final coming up. And then they might put out a weakened side a few days before. So you also compare their home record or their away record and looking at it, is it a league match, a cup game, Champions League or Europa League match? You've also got obviously you've got the League Cup and the FA Cup in there. So it's all different things because teams will approach all of those types of matches in a different manner. 44, I'm just reading from the Football Trading ebook, mate. We've only just started, so you can watch the first 10 minutes. I'll catch up later. So then you get to strategy, where once we have our analysis and we think we've got a pretty good handle on what might happen in a game, we've got to decide on a strategy to use in that game. So you'll see that in the email. Sometimes it might be match odds. Sometimes it'll be over under 2.5. Might be the halftime score market, the correct score market, or even the Asian handicap market. So it might have a side that's got a strong record of scoring first. I think we've put one of those in the email tonight. We got a strong record of a team, or it might have been the Chelsea one. I can't remember, but there's something that I've written for you either last night or tonight where you got a side of a strong record of scoring first. But then like Arsenal, you know, they can score first and often give up a lead, like Liverpool did in the Europa final against Sevilla. So there are sides that are good to lay after they take a lead. And through good analysis, you will be able to identify them. It's important right now to understand analysis is the key because no strategy will overcome bad analysis. All right, and I'll explain the strategies I use later when we get down to the strategy section. Risk management, we don't need to spend a lot of time on. We've already covered that on day one, where we're looking at 5% of our bank for maximum trade. So if you've got £1,000 bank, the largest you'd be looking at would be taking a £50 liability. So with higher risk trades, like taking a position on the correct score where you've got 19 outcomes, you may choose to stick to 1 or 2%, or you can look at something like 3 or 4%. But then again, you've got, like I spoke about to you about the Tottenham second half goal strategy that I've come up with, where I've got a greater than 90% expectancy, I might risk 10% of my bank on that, because it's a very high likelihood I'm going to be collecting. But that's the only time I do so. I will never ever risk more than 10% of my bank on a trade with less than an 85% expectancy. So then it just comes down to discipline. Now, discipline's what we're going to be looking at solidly next week. We're going to be going through all of psychology. I've got a couple of really cool things lined up for you. We're going to go through the trading mindset book, a couple of other things, and I've got a bit of a special treat for you. So next week, we're going to go through all about discipline, and this is the area where most people fail. So we need to spend a lot of time on that in our time together, looking at getting the right head on your shoulders and the right way of thinking of things and the right way to approach it. Because people can make mistakes after a winning run. They can get a little bit too cocky, or they can do consistently well. Like I show on the horse racing, where you've constantly seen me tweet for years and years about making £10 a race. And people come into the trading room and they learn to do that, and they're very happy with their consistency. But then they think, well, why am I just doing this for a tenner? I may as well make 100. And it all comes unstuck, because the markets can only take a certain amount of money. So we'll cover that when we do our racing week. But for now, just know that people do make mistakes even when they're in front through overconfidence. And of course, then they also fail with their discipline when they have a loss. And I had a discipline lapse yesterday, the one I made a video about, and I put it in to the horse racing room. I'll stick it in the 100 Club room later if you want to see it. Luckily, it didn't cost me money, but it should have. I deserve to lose it. It's just terrible. It's a rookie error. I just convinced myself that something was going to happen because of what my eyes were seeing. I'm looking at it and going, well, that can't win. Can't possibly win. It was, when you see the race, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But there was no way that horse should have won the race. And yet it didn't go up in price. It just stayed where it was and then started coming down. And then it ended up hitting the lead. And it dropped so quickly because the others just fell off instantly. It was like I've gone from an even position to virtually wiped out in the trade in a couple of seconds. There's nothing I could have done. Luckily for me, the favourite came home over the top and beat it, but it gave me a real shake and thinking, well, why did you just sit there? Because your brain's saying, well, it's beat, and you're not paying attention to what the market does. And I've made a couple of videos showing that, which I can put the links for as well, showing you that when it doesn't do what you want, to just get out. But this was just yesterday, the horse was just so clearly beaten in my head that I didn't even contemplate. I was just watching the race. I didn't even contemplate getting out of it. I was just, can't win, just can't win. But when you watch it, you'll agree with me. You'll think, yeah, I can see that. No way that can win. And then as you watch the race unfold, it becomes a nightmare. So I'll have a look at that later. So what the thing is with football, right, is most markets are only going to move one way until something happens. So when a game kicks off, the draw will come down and the two teams will slowly start to drift, obviously, until a goal scored. And generally, the over 2.5 goals market will start to drift. You're not going to see it drift and then come right back and drift and come back. It will just keep drifting until something happens. So what can happen sometimes is you get in a position, the market sort of can move against you. If there's, you're backed over 2.5, you won't get anywhere until a goal comes. It's just going to keep going against you. So rather than trade out for a loss, if no goal comes after 30 minutes, they hold on and wait for that goal to come, and it might never come. Yet when looking at it the other way, say they'd laid over 2.5 goals after 30 minutes with no goals, a lot of traders would be happy to jump out with a profit as they're fearing that a goal will come and wipe it out. So that's really what we're going to look at psychologically next week, why we do that. When the game's going our way and we've got the green, we don't want to lose it. We think, I'm going to take that now because if a goal comes, that's going to wipe out my whole profit and I'm going to be back where I started. Yet when it goes the other way and you're in a losing position and you think, I'll just hold on another minute for a goal, and then that minute goes, but he had a shot. There might be another goal here. And you start to hope and you don't exit because you're hoping that a goal can get you back into it. So it's going to be really interesting next week when we look at all that, how you approach it and why we do the things we do. So yeah, they exit in fear of losing profit, but stay in because of a fear of taking a loss. So whichever way you look at that, fear is costing them money. If they exit too soon, they don't make as much profit as they should. And if they exit too late because a goal doesn't come, then fear has cost them a larger loss. So the best plan is always try and make your decision before the event starts. An example, maybe we've backed over 2.5, and if there are 2 first half goals, we're going to get out. There's no emotion overriding your decision. You've made the decision before the game. There's my bet. If there's 2 first half goals, I'm out. And then when it happens, your brain's not stressing you out going, well, you've already made the decision. So now you've just got to execute it. So you can analyse, place the trades, act on the events that take place and close the trades. It is easier said than done when emotions evolve. So we've got to take the emotion out of it. And it can be a lot worse if you've got an emotional attachment to the team, like a lot of England supporters do when England play. So rule number 1 with discipline is never bet big on anything with which you have an emotional attachment. And if you feel you have to, then plan the strategy before the event and stick to it. If you bet with emotion, you have pain when you lose money and it doubles because your team lost. So that's one of the hardest areas that traders find dealing with. Because we're not analysing or choosing a strategy or having to worry about risk, as we deal with that before the game starts, we're now dealing with the tricky bits, the emotions. A lot of the times, obviously, you hope to just have a winning trade and we get the cash, but it's when we deal with the other side of it that this section deals with. But we'll come back to this because I want to do a lot on it next week, and we can reopen this book and go through this next week and look at things like that. All right. So obtaining value. We've looked at obtaining value yesterday. That's the second most important key element to success. Obviously, your analysis has got to be good. Bad analysis will not win you any trades, okay? So we've got a section in the book here on how to calculate expected value. It's the amount a player can expect to win or lose if you were to place a bet on the same odds many times over. So obviously, if you were to place a £10 bet on heads in a coin toss and you're going to get £11 every time you get it right, your EV would be 0.5. Then there's a section in the book here which it's a bit confusing, so you're going to have to read it 2 or 3 times. So I'm not going to go through it with you this morning. I'm just going to go through the book and show you the important bits. But if you're interested in how to calculate expected value, I'm a bit iffy on it because I think every game's different. Whereas you can easily calculate expected value on a coin toss or a roulette table, something that's going to be constant, sport's not constant. So it's very, very difficult to do. So I'm not a huge fan of it. But when I write books, I try and cover everything so that people that are interested in it do it. I'm just sort of a bit of a spontaneous trader. I research a game, make a decision what I think is going to happen, and I just go with it. I was convinced there'd be 3 goals in the game last night between Arsenal and Leicester. And another guy that uses that other way of calculating it said he didn't think there was. He's the one that uses the financial way of looking at it. He'll go back 5 years when Arsenal's been trading that price on overs. He says, no, I don't think it's a bet. And we were both very close to being right and wrong. The second goal came with 10 minutes to go, And with a bit of luck, we would have got the third, but we didn't get it. I don't think the weather helped. Remember I spoke to you about the weather. It was chucking it down with rain as well, and it wasn't the greatest conditions for them to play. No excuses, it didn't win, but that's what I mean. If you play that game again next week in fine weather, there might be 4 goals. So it's very hard to calculate expected value on something as random as sport. Okay, so if you have a read of that section, if you've got the book, you'll understand what we're going through. And it just shows you how to calculate it on a football game. I do the Wigan versus Manchester United game there, I think. So then looking at the types of football to trade, obviously you've got your league football, which is the bread and butter. So your Premier League, Championship, you've got La Liga, maybe some German football. They're the ones that most people trade. Also, I look at the A-League when it's on in the mornings over here. So cup football, obviously completely different. Now, for me, cup football, very, very difficult to trade. I don't do well at it at all. I just find the managers just tinker with the team so much that you're basically looking at a different side. I mean, have a look here at Man City in this game. Opened up at 4. They drifted a little bit, probably people in the know, and then they stayed that way for, a day or two. But then when the team came out, up she went. I think in this game, the manager might have made, 9 or 10 changes to the side for this game. It was virtually the reserve side because, they're not interested in this. If you have to sacrifice something to rotate your teams, this is normally the one that they give up on. It's just like squad rotation. So as traders, they're the 2 words that we hate the most. So they expect, they might be playing some simple side, a lower level. They might be playing a League One side or something, and they just, are expected to win the game so comfortably, but yet they don't. So you can see prices like 1.3 for some team, but we don't really know the team until it's announced, and then you can see the whole team's been swapped out and for the big game coming up on the weekend, and away they go. So when you've got 4 cups to look at for the season, a lot of Premier League managers will put the FA Cup or the League Cup, sorry. The League Cup's the lowest priority, then the FA Cup, then the Premiership, and the Champions League's usually the ones that the top 4 sides are trying to get with. So looking at the Champions League, that's the one that every team's going to be trying virtually every game in that. And Euro tournaments, they come around obviously every 4 years, 2 years World Cup, and then 2 years later the Euro. They're a bit tougher because you're dealing with the high-quality players. They don't often play together as a team, and then the teams that they're in don't often play against the other teams. So, like, for example, we don't often see England playing Spain or England playing Germany or England playing France. And then when you think the England team is made up of a load of other teams, it's really tough sometimes to try and get a handle on what's the proper price and how they're going. So I find personally those games easy to trade what I'm watching because you get to see patterns in how Arsenal play Tottenham or Liverpool play Man United. But as I say, we don't often get to see England v Italy or Poland v Scotland. And England versus Scotland, the Scots really lift for it, and England really lift against Germany. Those one-off games can be really difficult to get a handle on. I was a bit harsh on Wales in the book. I said nobody knows how Wales will perform in a tournament because for most of our lifetimes, mine included, they've rarely been in one. That was a bit harsh. I should probably swap that out and put Scotland now, shouldn't I? Because Wales are doing okay. So I guess for the way I look at it, you can look at the half dozen games for each side, look for the goals scored and conceded to try and line up an opportunity. You look at the first round in matches, like I mentioned, you look at England's record and they usually fail to win their first game in the tournament, that they prefer not to lose. Losing the first game really puts you on the back foot. So if you look at the history of their first games, in Euro 2012, they drew with France. They didn't qualify 2008. They did have a win in 2004, and they lost to Portugal. So one win in the past 3 visits to the Euros. Then in the World Cup, they lost 2-1 to Italy. They drew 1-1 with the USA, and they beat Paraguay back in 2006. So even going back that far, so you can see England have only won 2 of their past 6. And the further back you go, the worse it gets. So then we go through the World Cup. We have a look at the World Cup. No need to focus too much on it today. I'll probably throw something together when the next World Cup comes around. You can come and join me for that. But I like looking at tournament bets, so you can find value in looking at red cards. There were fewer red cards at 2014 than any other edition, but we saw a joint high number of goals. And then you've got all these different stats that you can have a look at. So things to consider when selecting a football trade. All right, time decay is an important one. We've touched on this in Web Club, and we haven't really done it yet in 100 Club, but I'll get to it. Nick, no, I don't ever trade any anti-post markets. I just like having my bank available every day to use and recycle. That's how you make money, is just keep recycling your money. If I go and put on, a bet, anti-post bet, say in a tournament, and it's 3 months away, that money's tied up for 3 months. And the money that I'm going to make from that trade, I can make 5 or 6 times over by having it in my bank and recycling it each horse race or each football game. So no, I never bet anti-post. Suppose if I had, a big bank, 20 grand or something, you could put 10 of it aside for anti-post bets that you think, but no, it's not anything I've ever looked at. So things to consider when selecting a trade. Time decay is a big one. So what I was going to say is in Web Club, we looked at it where when I go to back, or even if I want to lay, if I want to lay over 2.5 goals, because I think there won't be 3 goals in the game, I often won't do it at the start. Because obviously when it kicks off, you've got 90 minutes plus your 3 minutes injury time to get 3 goals. And what we found over the last few years is at kickoff, the price just doesn't move for a few minutes. So you're basically risking your liability for no profit. So I know it sounds a bit backwards, but often what I will do if I'm going to lay over 2.5 goals, I'll back it at the start for the first 5 or 6, maybe up to 10 minutes. Because the price moves so little in that first few minutes that you've basically got a free bet. You can, if there's an early goal, it drops right down and you lock in the profit, happy days. If the goal doesn't come, which you're expecting anyway, you just trade out for 1 or 2 tick loss and then get on with your lay and the price starts to go. But if you have a look at this graph here, you can see time decay at the beginning of the game where it just drifts slowly, and then there's a goal and it comes down. But as you get towards the end of the game, it starts to go vertical. So that's time decay. The less time there is for something to happen, the faster the price is going to go. So when we trade some live football, and I'm doing the over 2.5 goals market, I will do that for you, where I'll show you how we go and stick a bet on the overs, and 5 or 6 minutes later, the price has barely moved. So of course it works when you lay late in the game, you think there will not be a late goal. So you put in a lay and the price is going to drift up really quickly. Whereas if you lay at the start of the game, the price will barely move. The downside is, of course, you're laying at the higher prices and it can get expensive if it goes wrong. But that graph will just show you how time decay affects a market. So looking at the entry point, this is the price point where we're going to enter the trade. So we've done our analysis on the game. We think there's a 50% chance of there being 3 goals. So if that's our rated chance, we cannot bet if the price of over 2.5 goals is below even money, because we're taking bad value. So if you rate something as 50%, that's the same as a coin toss. So would you bet 1.9 on heads or tails when you know the true odds are 50%? Obviously you wouldn't. But if you could see it was 210 on that, would you bet? Of course. Because if you can back even money shots at 210 over a year, you're going to have a very big year. So the entry point is crucial to understanding if we have obtained value for our investment in the market. You can't just take any price on offer. You've got to look to see if the market is under or over our assessment first. So one thing I always try to do is not look at the Betfair market before I analyse a game, because I don't want to be anchored to any opinion that the market has before I go and do it. So Neil, you're into psychology. You will understand anchor points and stuff like that, a lot of which we're going to talk about next week. But it's a well-known sales technique, anchoring. You know, someone will advertise something and they'll say, take my ebooks, for example, right? They're $49.99. But if I just go and put 10% off, that doesn't mean a lot to people. But if I go and put the book is not $49.99, it's $29.99, people get anchored to that 49 and they see an absolute bargain. They can relate quickly to $49.99 to $29.99. Whereas if I say, I'm going to give you 40% off, it doesn't have the same effect on people. So it's just about anchor points. When you're selling something, you get anchored to something. So don't go and look at the Betfair price, because it tells your brain what the price should be, and then you'll come around to making it that price in your analysis, and you don't want that. It's really nice to get a shock when you go and rate something and you come back with your price on a bit of paper and you go, right, this thing should be 1.38. Right, got my price. Open Betfair, 1.95. Wow. Because if you do it the other way, if you go and look at Betfair first and see 1.95, and then you do your analysis and you come up with 1.38, you're anchored to the 195. And you will think, oh, I've made a mistake here. That can't be right. I've done something wrong. Why is it 190 and I've come up with that? So analyse a game with a clear head. Don't look at Betfair before you analyse it. Don't even open it. Just go and look at the game, open up your Formlabs or your free sites that we looked at yesterday, analyse your game, get your price, then go to Betfair. Okay? Yeah, a lot of people don't realise how much it biases our opinion, but by the end of next week, you'll be in no doubt about it. So Mark's just put a question in. Tony, a quick one, revalue an entry point. If we rate a game over 2.5 as 195, but pre-match it's only 185, so no value pre-match, well, you could consider laying it, Mark, because there's only 3 things you can do with a price: back it, lay it, or leave it. So in that example, if you've rated it as 195 and it came up as 195, I'd think, well, there's no value in it, so there's no point. I'm not going to bet. If it's 210, I'd back it. I'd be all over it. If it's 185 or less, I'd lay it. But what you've asked there is, after 15 minutes and no goals, over 2.5 is now, say, over your value of 195. Now, it wouldn't be classed as value because that price was based on 90 minutes of football. Now you've only got 75 minutes of football. So you couldn't class it as value. So it's a really difficult one. You can get 10 different answers from 10 different people, but you're asking me, and that's my opinion. So I think you'll need to look at what we'll do as part of our football tomorrow. We'll go and have a look at the time of the first goal, which can be important, because if you've got 2 teams playing that have early goals as standard, that would be a different strategy to 2 teams that very rarely score in the first half, like we saw yesterday with Crystal Palace. I think a lot of their games were 0-0 at half-time. Remember, they had only 2 of their games, I think, 2 of 16 had gone over 2.5 goals. but we looked at Chelsea and said, well, look how many, 14 of 16 of theirs went over. So which team's going to be dominant? We decided Chelsea, so we went with the overs. And, of course, I think it ended up 3-2 or something, didn't it? But what you could do there, Mark, is basically look at perhaps dripping your stake in. What you could do is put a little bit in at the beginning in case you get that early goal. So take a bit of the 185, put a bit of the 195 in, put, say, a little bit in at even money, a bit more at 210 and maybe a bit more at 220. So say you wanted to do a £30 back bet, you could just do 6 lots of a fiver. So if you put them in at all those prices, then you've ended up with an average bet after the 15 minutes of around 210. So you've sort of squeezed some value out of the market that way. And if an early goal comes, okay, you haven't got your whole bet on, but you still got a win out of it. Okay? Yeah, all right. So just reading the rest of that, as the 10 minutes eroded the value, so you need to then look at the stats for no goals. That's right. Well, that's what we use the Formlab for. Remember, it shows us in the live logic what's happened after 10 minutes, how often something would happen. So Damo said, yeah, the value's having 90 minutes, although it's good to drip in, and you guys understand that. Cool. Then the exit point is the price point where we choose to close a trade. It's almost as important as the entry point. Most punters or traders don't think about this a lot before they enter, and that's one of the discipline things. They have their strategy. They go, well, I'm going to lay the draw, and I'm going to lay it at 3.5, and if there's a goal, I'm going to lay it at 7. Well, what if there's not a goal? When are you going to get out? Oh, well, I'll worry about that when it happens. That's what most people will do. They have a plan in their head to get out if it goes their way, and they think, well, I've got my plan, I'm all right. But they don't really plan if it goes wrong, because too many people are anchored to being right. They just think, well, I've done the analysis, so this is what's going to happen. I'm right. So the price won't go against me because I've done all this work. So the option based on a price might look like this, okay? You're going to lay the draw at 3.5 and you get out at 7. Goal comes, favourite scores it, the price will most likely go above 7. And you can get out, and you'll probably even get a slightly better price than that. The later the goal comes, the higher the price will go. And the second option is time. Say a goal is scored, but the price only went to 5.8 or maybe 6 and falls short of your exit at 7. The longer you stay in, the more exposed you are to an equalising goal. And I think we had that in one the other day in the room. I put up a lay the draw for you, and the goal came, but in under a minute later, the equaliser came, and there was just no time for anybody to get out. It's just disappointing, but that's what can happen. You're also open to a second goal, which would put you well over the exit price. Yeah, it happened with Chelsea as well. We didn't have time to trade out of our minus 1.5 handicap because as soon as they scored, Crystal Palace came back and knocked one in. And then they did it again, and they got 3-1 up, and then Palace came back and made it 3-2. It was very frustrating. But we got the overs, so we came out of the game okay. So it's just about looking at your options there, about choosing an exit, because a lot of people don't do it. So just because we analyse a game a certain way, it doesn't mean it will pan out like that. We can't always wait for a game to start before we analyse what's likely to happen. So don't be afraid to make a hasty exit from something that isn't doing what you think it should based on your analysis. So if you're thinking that there's going to be a lot of goals in a game and you watch the first 10 minutes and they're just kicking it around and haven't had a shot, just get out of the trade and wait for it to open up a bit. So, yeah, the exit would be probably around 115, 117 if it goes pear-shaped, Damo, in the England trade. So he's talking about the cricket trade we're doing where we're laying England at 135 and we're backing at 270. But we've got 5 days, and I don't think they're going to get a lot of play in today because it's nearly lunchtime and the covers are still on, and they're big covers as well. They're not looking like coming off. It's just typical, isn't it? You wait 3 months for a game of cricket and then on it comes and it's chucking it down. So understanding market moves. One of the key points to understanding market moves is try and learn what will happen if an event happens or doesn't happen. So you try and learn what will happen if, you often just hear me talking off the cuff and say, if this happens, the price will go to such and such. So like last night, if you're looking at Chelsea versus Crystal Palace and you're looking at a lay the draw, if Chelsea score first, let's say the draw was 350, the draw price might go to 8. But if Crystal Palace score first, the draw price won't actually go up at all. It will come down because the market is so expecting a Chelsea equaliser to come back, the draw doesn't go up. So you try and work out what happens if. And we've discussed it a few times. What happens if Team A scores? What happens if Team B scores? What happens if there's no goal? Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that can happen in football, right? 3 things. Team A scores, Team B scores, or there's no goal. Nothing else can happen. So it's not that hard to keep a handle on what's happening or what's likely to happen. So like I've just said, when laying the draw, I like to get a good gauge on what will happen if either side score. This market has got really clever over the last few years and is nowhere near the movement we used to see. So, if the underdog scores first, despite the score being 0-1, the draw will come down in price. You've got a dilemma. So as far as your position goes, you're actually winning because the game isn't a draw, it's 0-1. So your trade's winning, but financially your trade's not winning. So what are you going to do? So it's a rare situation where a game is doing what you want, but you're not getting any advantage over the market. So some people would lay the draw again at the lower price. Other people would then go and lay the underdog because if the market does come back to where it was, you can close out the trade on the underdog with a nice profit, and that will eliminate any loss you've got currently on the later draw. So Peter's just said we've got a cricket update in 10 minutes. So Peter's also said Leicester game the other day was 0-0 half-time and 3-0 full-time. Exactly right. That's what I was hoping for last night. When Arsenal got that first goal last night, I thought, well, that's normal. If we get one first half goal, we've got 45 minutes plus 3 injury to get 2 goals in the second half. I was really hoping for an early second half goal. You know how often there's a goal in the first 46 to 55 minutes in the second half. It just didn't pan out. But again, the weather was atrocious. So if you'd known that before kickoff, you might think, you know what, I'll scale down my bet a bit or I won't do it. I can't see them scoring 3 goals in this weather. But it is what it is. We did it, and that was the outcome. So as you trade more games, you'll understand the consequences of a market and how that'll be beneficial or detrimental to you. So looking at pre-match markets, some people like to trade the pre-match markets. I don't have a lot of interest in them. A lot of you will know Alan Thompson. This is something that he likes to do. He does his analysis and looks to go and bet on teams either with the bookies or with Betfair on a Wednesday or Thursday, knowing that a lot of their supporters will back them, or just knowing that they've got a history of sort of coming in over the next few days as the money arrives. So it's the thing that he does. I'm not really interested in it. As I say, I'd rather keep my money and just use it for the racing and keep turning it over and making money on it than having it sit in the market for 4 days. So Asian handicap markets, I rarely get involved in them, but I do sometimes. We did one with Chelsea. We did the -1.5. The market's fairly, accurate with them. And there's a little bit of a section there of what Asian handicap betting is. So you can have a read of that, and it explains it. So there's Crystal Palace +2.5, Man United -2.5. And then you see the +1.5 there at 137, Man United -1.5. Wouldn't you like that price these days? Manchester United -1.5, and they're at 3.7. You'd think they'd win by 2 goals, but when I did this, they weren't going so well. So Tony said we had cover on 1-1 on Chelsea and Everton. There was a reason we didn't, or was there a reason we didn't last night on Arsenal, or just the way it was going last week? It just varies. I think last night we did one of the games we had cover on 1-1, I thought, but I just didn't think it would end 1-1 last night. I just thought there'd be 3 goals in it, and I did that. I looked at it as I'm just chucking away money on the 1-1. But no, I could have done it. I did it with Everton, Tony, because Everton have a lot of draws. Remember, they'd drawn more games than they'd won or lost this season. I think it was like 3, 6, and 5 or something. The draws were 6. They draw a lot, so I like to have that as cover. Whereas Arsenal and Leicester don't draw a lot of games, so I didn't have it in. But I usually try and explain when I send the email why I'm not doing it. But you're always welcome, once you've read the email, to just drop me a message, either in the 100 Club or via email, and say, hey, what's your thinking here? Why are we not covering 1-1? And I'll usually be able to give you an explanation. Try and do it in the room if you can, because if you do it in the room, everyone can see your question and everyone can see the answer. If 30 people email me the same question, then I've got to take time answering 30 emails. So I thought Leicester would push for a goal too, but the difficulty is, John, when Arsenal got the red card, they obviously forgot any thought of scoring a goal, and they just set 5 at the back and thought, well, we're just going to hang on. And that's what they did. It's quite annoying. That's what's hard when you've gone overs and you ask yourself, are both teams trying to score here? The answer is no, they weren't. And that makes it more difficult when you're on an overs bet. Okay, so accepting losses. Again, we're going to cover this a lot of next week. So we're going to have a look. It's an area that a lot of traders struggle accepting losses. There's a great tendency to hold on to positions in the hope that you can recover and get out of trouble. More often than not, we get into a deeper hole, and that was way bigger. So I tried to help someone the other day. It was Barry. Tried to help Barry. He had a position where he'd laid Chelsea in the half-time market, and he said, what can I do here to cover this? And I said, well, all you can really do is back 0-1 and 0-2, because if it's 0-1 or 0-2 at half time, that wins and that'll cover your lay of Chelsea. But of course, when it went 2-1 before half time, now it's added to the loss. It's made it worse. The Chelsea lay is going to lose, and it's not 0-1 or 0-2 anymore. So it's no good. So as best you can, make your decisions before the game and try and stick to them. Things can get a bit emotional during a game, and we don't always make the best decisions when staring at a big loss. A lot of people will just try and remove that loss and put more money on to try and get back to green. I showed you that one in the darts with where you ended up in a position where you're going to lose $1,500 or win 2. It's crazy. You're much better off just taking a $600 loss and going and doing another trade than just trying to bail yourself out with a bucket when there's a massive hole in the back of the boat. So as I explained, or I will explain next week in psychology, it's very easy to close a trade when you're in a winning position, but most of us struggle with closing a losing position, preferring to hold it to hope for that miracle recovery. And while sometimes that will come off, a lot of the times it won't. So we're going to have a look at that. So trading a game, just taking you through the process of trading a game, fairly straightforward. We do the same routine 90% of games, and they'll usually be league games where the teams playing face each other twice a year, every year. So obviously I use Football Form Labs. You know about the discount you can use to get that. Sports Trader, you can get 30% off using that. So it gives us 40 leagues all over the world. I'm going to do you guys a new Formlab PDF to show you how I use that, because that one, I'm not happy with it. I think I should update it and just make it a bit clearer. It seems there's a couple of errors in it. So I'll do you a new one and I'll get you that. Then we look at the different strategies. So I use 9 main approaches in football games. So they cover most of the outcomes. So we look at the match odds. That's fairly simple, where we just take a position either backing or laying one team or laying the draw. usually I like laying aside, so that will allow me to keep the draw on side. You've got two outcomes of the only three possible outcomes on your team rather than just backing. In this example, I did back Aston Villa at 3.5 and then laid them at 123. So once we've sort of traded out, you can see that a bit bigger there, in at 350, and they've scored out at 123. Job done, only 20 minutes in. So now the money's locked in. You don't really care what happens. Then there's laying the draw, where obviously we think the game will not end in a draw. So this trade was done in the second half. I've just obviously looked at the shots and thought there's a goal coming here. I laid the draw at 1.81. Bolton scored, made the exit at 570, closed the trade. So you don't want to be selecting matches with draw prices above 4. Because as Craig will know, we've done a couple recently where we've taken on sort of high liabilities in them. And when they come unstuck, it's a bit painful. So I tend not to lay games with the draw price above 4. Try and stick to around 350. The market seems to assess most games around 350. The under over 2.5 goals, you obviously know about that one. We do that one a lot. So backing over 2.5 goals is simple. Once I've established we got value, we got a strategy of exiting if there's 2 first half goals. In the rare event that 2 goals come in the first 15 minutes, then I highly recommend you stay in at least until half time, because that price is not going to move until half time. So you basically got a free bet. It'll be sitting around 116, 117, and it'll only be 120, 121 at half time, and then you can just make the decision then. But there's been numerous times when the team went 2 goals up in the first half and then just sat back second half and played with an extra man in defence. Their lead's in no danger until they concede a goal. So often when they have a 2-goal buffer, they won't push for a third. So you're now back in a position where you've got only one team trying to score, and yet you're on an overs goal bet. It's not an ideal situation. So laying over 2.5 goals, we use a strategy of waiting for 5 minutes after kickoff before placing the lay. Reason is these days the market doesn't move for 5 or 6. And I've even extended that now. Rather than waiting, I back it. So even if my analysis says I'm laying over 2.5 goals here, I'm still going to go and back it for the first 5, because it's not going to move very much. You got a free bet. If an early goal comes, hallelujah, you've got the money. If it doesn't, after 5 or 6, you just exit that trade for a couple of ticks loss and then put your lay in, and the market will start moving in your way. Because the reason is it doesn't move. So you're exposed for no possible profit, and a goal's going to cripple your position. If you've laid it at, say, 210, an early goal's going to put you down at 140, 150. And then if there's a second goal, you're at 120, and then you need a miracle to get out of it. So you get a virtual free kick by backing it for 5 minutes. And once you see the price start to rise, then you can get out and you can go from there. So looking at the correct score market, I usually trade this in the second half quite late. I'm often hedging a position against a lay the draw or an over 2.5 goals market. So I'll look at that with 20 minutes to go. Usually if both teams are trying to score a goal, rather than having a game where a side's 2-0 up and they've parked the bus. So in this one here, I waited until the 70th minute and I've laid the 0-0 at 3.8, and then I've used a drip feed where I lay £25 at 360, 340, 320, and 5-tick increments all the way down to even money. And that's when I stop. And then we've got the goal here. You can see it's just about to reset. So we've got the biscuits on that one. So that's a drip laying technique we can look at. So the best possible scenario is what happened here, where all your drip lays get matched and then bang, the goal goes in. Sometimes you get the goal when you're partway through your drips. That's okay. You're still going to win. Because what some people say, if I'd gone and put that whole bet in, so if you've got like £400 there and you go and lay the whole lot at 3.8, you're going to be looking at a liability of around 1,100, 1,200. By drip laying it in, you see the liability's kept at 662. It's nearly halved the liability. So it's not it's not such a big liability if you get it wrong. The downside is, say I'd only got 5 of these trades in, when the goal went in, I would only win 125 rather than 375. However, it's still a win, doesn't matter. It's about not losing. It's not about how much you win. A winning trade's a winning trade. But also, if the goal came really quickly, you'd still have the opportunity to then go and lay 0-1 or 1-0 if you think there'll be another goal. Okay? So when I do a correct score position, I make sure my liability is what I'm prepared to lose, because I will not trade out. We discussed this the other day. I will stay in and until the death. And if I lose, then that's my maximum liability that I'm going to lose. Because the amount of goals that you see after 85 minutes that come in, and the goal comes really late, it's just incredible. So, no, Mike, you've probably got this, mate. This is the football trading ebook. I'm sure you've got it already. So we're just going through the football ebook. So, no, it won't be made as a PDF. Okay, so I'm not going to trade out of it. I'm just going to stay in it. The amount of injury time goals, that's what I was hoping for last night. If you look back over the history and when we do the time of the goals, wait till you see how many goals Arsenal score after 88 minutes, or games that they're involved in have a goal. That's what I was pinning my hopes on last night. I'm like, well, we've still got an 85% chance of a goal here, because there's almost nearly always a goal in Arsenal games very late. And I think there would have been last night had it not been for the red card, but that changed the game. Well, it depends, Darren. Darren's asked, is my first entry based on price or time? You got to consider both, because you got to consider how long's left. I'll often go and look at a goal, right? And I'll think, 87 minutes, there's going to be a goal here. And I'll go and have a look at the price, and it's 1.3. And I think that's ridiculously high when there's only 2 minutes left in the game. So I will consider what price. If there's only 2 or 3 minutes left in a game, I'm looking to lay something at 110, 112. I certainly don't want to be laying at 1.3. So you're giving away like 30% of your stake. You lay it for 100, you're risking 30 quid. You've only got 2 minutes left in a game. I see that as a really poor value position. So, I wouldn't do it. Well, Damo, when I was doing this, I had a much bigger bank than 1,000 quid. So this was back in the day, mate, when we were using like serious amounts. I think I might have had this might have been part of the trading fund that I was trading with in London. So I think we had like a 50K bank or something of the fund. You know, they sold it as a fund, and everyone's money was in it. So no, it wasn't a big bet back in the day. But yeah, if you've got £1,000 bank, you don't want to be risking 600 of it on one trade. So the halftime score market is another one we like looking at, because if you think there's going to be a goal in the first half, it's often a lot cheaper than laying in the normal goal markets. It's a lot cheaper. So looking at this one, a lot of teams have had a first half goal. When I do it, I will find a team that's had a first half goal in at least 9 of their past 10 games. I'll then find an opponent that's had a first half goal in at least 8 of their 10 away games. So that says at least 17 of the past 20 matches between them have had a first half goal. So that's a strike rate of 85%, and it gives us a price point. So our analysis at 85% means there's a 15% chance of no goal. So if you divide 100 by 15, you've got a price of 6.6. So if we see on an exchange that it's below 4, you've got incredible value, and you're going to win around 80 to 85% of the time if the stats hold up, because we know it should be 6.6. So I've done this lay here at 2.88, and there's been a goal. We've got the biscuits. So there's 2 ways to trade it. There's an outright lay where we just place the bet before kickoff and just watch the game and leave it run as a value bet, or there's the preferred one that I use where I'll drip lay my stake in £25 at a time for as much liability as I'm prepared to take. Now that's just in the match mark. So let's say if you're looking at Arsenal versus Leicester, it doesn't matter whether Arsenal or their opponent scored the goal. Did their game have a first half goal in it? And did Leicester's game have a first half goal in it? So I'll show you after this, when I get through this, I'll quickly open Formlabs and show you what I'm talking about. So yeah, I use that drip lay. So in this one below here, I've made 6 drip lays of £100 each, starting at 276 and ending at 230. So had I done the whole 600 at 2.76, my liability would have been £1,056 instead of the 926 that you see here. So that's why I sort of drip lay. So whilst it saved me 130 if I'm wrong and there is no goal in the game, there's a chance that an early goal may just see 3 of those 6 drip lays matched. It means I only win 300 and not the 600 I would have. So you need to decide which method suits you best. Quite often now, I will just put my maximum liability, what I'm prepared to lose, put it in and just leave it. That's me. But if you do a drip lay and there's an early goal, you're talking like inside the first 5 or 10 minutes, you simply lay the next score and carry on because you've still got 35 minutes, which is what I've done here. You can see here I've gone and laid the, I'll move that over a bit, the 0-0 at 2.68 for 250, and then I've gone and put the 0-1 in at 117 for 700. Now that looks a big bet, but it isn't, because once it became 0-0, once it wasn't 0-0, this 250 is in the bank. I've won that. They can't take it back, and I'm only risking 117. So I've virtually given back half of my profit to have a shot at another goal. So I've jumped in here 0-1 for 700. So what you can see now is rather than just take the 250, if there's no goal, I'm still going to win 132. So that's in my head. I've won that. That's in the bank. But if there is another goal, and it must have been an attacking game, it's Leeds versus Derby, so you can imagine it would have just been chaotic. I've thought, well, there's going to be another goal here. I'll go in low. And you can see here, look, I've gone in at 1.17 and the last traded price when the goal come was 1.16. So it was just extremely lucky, like immaculate timing. You love it when that happens. You put a bet in, bang, goal comes. We've done a few in the room where I've said, go and back a goal in this game. And by the time you guys have opened up the market, the goal's gone in. Happens to Norbert a bit too, but that's what can happen. So one exception when this angle can be explored is in the Euros or World Cup. You can look at sort of total goals, red cards, yellow cards, away from those normal markets that I trade. So in the Euros in 2012, it's 76 goals, average of 2.45. You go and have a look at it now and you see it's all different. So before the next World Cup in 2022, reflect on what happened in 2018, compare it to 2014 and 10, see if there's any trends. We were supposed to have the Euros this year, but of course that's probably going to be next year now. So it can be tough because obviously the teams that play in the Euros next year, there's going to be different referees, different conditions, there's VAR now, which means even less goals than normal. We're seeing so many goals ruled out for VAR and stuff. So it's all sort of changed. So another strategy I love is the over 2.5 first half goals. Now we covered this in the day one presentation. Started using it a couple of years ago. We got some good success. The good thing about the strategy is you've only got to get it really working 1 in 8 times for it to be profitable. So I call it my low risk, high reward. So what we're doing is just looking at, I'll just say some screenshots rather than read it all. So you're looking at, high reward here versus low risk. So what I've obviously done is laid £1,000 at 108. So my liability's 81. Then you get 2 first half goals like this, and you can trade out if you wanted to. So what I've done here is this is another one, Atlanta versus New York. This was 1.5 goals. So that's landed. And then we've got, was that the same game? Yeah, same game. So what I've done here is see how you've only got this one goal. All right. So you've got half the half left to get 2 goals. What I'll start to do around here when half of this time's gone is I'll go and I'll have a look at the under 1.5 to get out. So you see my liability is £81. Okay. I'll go and place a bet on the under 1.5 to cover that. So I've put that in for 93. Yes, it's going to cost me an extra 54 if there's no goal, but now 1 goal gets me out of trouble. So now I'm up £10 minimum on the game, and it's 41 minutes. If there's another goal in the next 4 minutes, you get this plus the 1,000. But now you're virtually in a free bet, no lose situation. So that's what we've done here. So you can see we've laid the under 1.5 at 164 and 148, and we've ended up with the money. I also like the next goal strategy. This is a strategy I use for either first half or second half. So I'll explain both. I'll go through them in the book with you. So the first half, I'm looking at being a goal if there's been 5 shots or more. So I'll show you this when we open up the Bet365 in a minute. But this is my formula for betting on a goal after a given amount of time. All right. I do know exactly what Psychoff does, Ian. It's no point me telling you because you can't replicate it. I think it's outrageous that he's charging $2,000 for a course. It's like me saying to you, I'm going to teach you my goal strategy, Ian. When I have a gut instinct that there'll be a goal, I place a bet. That's basically what the strategy is. He watches a game and he admits it. He watches a game and he says, I get a gut instinct that there'll be a goal and I place a bet. So how can you replicate that? And how can you charge someone $2,000 for 5 hours tuition just to teach them that? It's just unbelievable. Don't get me started. Right. So there's nothing Psychoff can do that you can replicate, nothing at all. But you can replicate this. I'm going to show you what I do and how I do it. So what I like to do is have a bit of a formula. I will bet on there being a goal in a game if there's been 5 shots or more on target inside the first 25 minutes. Any off target are not counted. Ideally, the price should be below 2, and you only need a 50% strike rate to keep this strategy in profit. Second half is the bigger one where I apply it after the 65th minute. Doesn't matter what the score is, but ideally, I like a difference of just 1 goal or equal. And I love to have a situation where both teams are trying to score. So if it's 3-0 or 4-0, unless there's a huge amount of shots, I won't do it. What I'm looking for is based on shots on target. I start looking at the stats on 65. The criteria is simple. If there's more than 1 shot per 7 minutes of game time, we're in business. So at 70 minutes, 10 shots on target would qualify for a bet, but 9 wouldn't. Okay, so if there's been 10 shots at 65, I'd lay the under, whatever, say it's 1-1, I'd lay under 2.5. So you can see in this image below, this game had 12 shots on target in 73 minutes. So that would qualify to lay under 4.5, or you could lay 1-3, as they're exactly the same bet. So this is what I'm looking for on Bet365 on target. Add these 2 up, okay, and times it by 7. So 12 sevens are 84. You've only got 73 minutes. You can have another bet on there being a goal in this game. It's interesting how many times this comes up. We did one the other day in the presentation that I've just sent you. I'll see if I can find it in a minute. You see here how you've got 4 goals in a half and then nothing. Let me just go and find you the one that we looked at the other day. So you look at here, this Rio Ave Braga game that we did. There were 5 first half goals, but then you get halfway through here and there still isn't one, and you sort of start to panic. So I was on the under 5.5. I only needed 1 goal to come, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get it. 5 first half goals and there's no second half goal. So then now you're up to like 76 minutes and there's still no second half goal. But I decided to bite the bullet and I cashed my profit in for 200 and then bet the whole 200. So it was going to be all or nothing. I was going to walk away with 400 or a fiver. And luckily the goal came and then another one came right at the end. So there's the goal there on about probably 80, 81 minutes. And then because we'd won the 400, I had that other crack just risking 20 quid on a late one, and we got it. So yeah, that was that. It seems to happen quite a lot, and because of that, is why I now tend to say, if we get 2 first half goals, lads, just get out. So let's go and have a look. John's got a game there, Kawasaki. So we'll go and have a quick look at that then and see if it's in play. So I'll just change the share. We'll go and have a look at this Kawasaki game. So we want bookmakers. We'll go bet 365 in play. Kawasaki. Okay, so you see here, you've got 7 shots on target in 78 minutes. So it's close, but for me, I wouldn't be betting on another goal. What's really interesting is the home team that's losing 4-0 have had more shots. They've had 2 on target and 9 off. But Kawasaki, their strikers are deadly. They've had 5 shots on target and hit 4 goals, unless they've just put a donkey in goal. So for that one, I probably wouldn't have a look. We'll go and have a look at this game over here, 2-1. So again, you see you've only got 5 shots on target, 80 minutes. So there's no way that I'd bet on there being another goal. That's the game that made that big noise when I was doing the presentations. You can imagine how long ago that goal came. So we got Mongolia Premier League there. Only 2 shots on target in 40 minutes. I'm not interested. See what else we've got. There's only a couple of games that have just kicked off, so there's nothing else really there. You've got the Belarus women, 2 shots, 7 minutes, 1 goal. So that could end up having a few goals in it. But this game we're looking at, no, I wouldn't be betting on a goal in either of them at this stage. So I'll go and swap back to where we were and finish off with that. I'll get rid of Bet365 so it doesn't scare us again. So that's the sort of thing I'm looking for, okay, when I'm making a judgment. So if you ever see me stick a bet in a room and say I'm betting on this, it's usually going to be because of the shots, or unless I've just seen something else that's made me want to do it. That's what I'm looking at. So here the goal did come. So if we'd done that bet, then we would have got the biscuits. I can't remember if I did it or not, but it just shows quite often. What can happen in these games is the managers, 4 first half goals, the managers are going to change things, aren't they? So you're not going to get the same outcome in the second half. It's obvious when you think about it. So what I do is I chose the setup that I've got. It seems to be the ideal shots point to get goals. If you put it any higher, you're very rarely going to get those conditions to have a bet. And if you set it low, you're going to lose a lot more. So for the first half, look for 5 shots on target in the first 25 minutes. And in the second half, divide the time by shots on target and look for 1 every 7 minutes from 65 minutes onwards. So trading out strategy, you've got to always have a look at trading out, usually based on the time left to achieve your goal and the number of shots that have been made. There's no fixed trading out formula. As every game's different, you'll need to make a judgment call every time. But here's the situation. So the original position I've made is looking for 3 goals. To win 600, and I'm risking 69. So I've obviously done it at around 111. Okay, an early goal puts the trade in a nice green position. But what can you do when the second goal takes a long time? So here's our opening position. All right, we've got 600 to win. We're only risking 69. We've got a nice early goal, so we would have had a nice profit. So as outlined earlier, if there's no goal or a second goal in this case, before 30 minutes, I like to then take a covering position by laying the under 1.5 in this situation, or it would mean laying the under 0.5 if there hadn't been a goal yet. You can't lose on the game if there is one more goal. So in 30 minutes, I'm going to take a position to lay under 1.5. So this adds a further liability of 31. So that's going to give me a whole liability of £100 on the game, okay? If there's no goal. But that's the worst thing that can happen. If there is a goal, which has happened here, you see I've won 75. Now I might still lose 69, but it's a free bet. I've got a free shot for the next 7 minutes at winning 600. So if there's one goal, I'm going to win 75 and lose the 69, but I'm covered. So a goal did come, as you saw, on 35. Then you've got a decision to make. Now this decision is going to come up a lot. Do you wait the remaining 7 minutes and hope that the goal comes out? Or you can take the £69 off the table and come away from that trade with a small profit as well as the 75. So in this situation, as there'd only been a few shots on target between the first and second goal, I wasn't really confident that the third goal was going to come. And I was able to exit the original trade with a profit of 30, which when you add it to the 75 from the overs, gives me a total of 100 on the match after you take your commission. And now if the third goal comes or not, it doesn't matter. So I've locked out that first trade for a profit of 30. I've already won 75 on the over 1.5. So we're away. So just to be clear on this as well, had that second goal come before the 35th minute or the 30th minute, before I'd put in that over 1.5, I would have almost certainly stayed in to win the 600. Because had this one here come, right, it's 40th minute. Had it come before 35, because I've already covered the 69, I'm going to stay in for the last 15 minutes or the last 10 minutes at least. But because this goal came so late on 40 minutes and I've only got 5, I think I'm not going to risk the 69 quid for 5 minutes. I doubt I'll get it. They probably won't even try and score again before half time now. So I'll just take the 30. So you've just got to make the decision you feel at the right time. Okay, you can always just come into 100 Club and say, Tony, I've got this position. What should I do here? And if I'm about, I'll answer you. All right, so in this one, we covered this in the game, in the presentation where I'd done a trade that went wrong and I covered it in the half-time market to buy myself time of 20 minutes. So we've covered that one. So looking at staking, pretty straightforward. Don't risk more than 5% on a trade unless you feel you've got an 80% chance of winning it. And if you get one of them, don't go over 80. So let's go and have a look. Tony said, I'm not going to go to it. I'll just go and look on my other screen. So Tony's picked up a game in Tajikistan. I'll just go and find it. So this has got, but there's already been a goal, mate. So we've sort of missed it. There's been a goal in it. So there is 5 shots on target in 17 minutes. But yeah, I would still probably bet on that. Let me go and look at the price. We'll go and see what price it is. So we're looking, if you go to football, we're looking at in play. It's not on Betfair, so you can't do it. So just forget it. Yeah, it's not on Betfair. It's probably on sports book, but the sports book price is not value. You're betting with a bookmaker, so it's going to be 5 to 10% lower than it really should be. But based on what I'm saying, Tony, yes, I think there'll be a goal before halftime in that game. So I would be looking to lay under 1.5 first half goals. So then you've got averaging, which you know about. Averaging is where you place 2 bets. We spoke about it before. So if I placed a back bet at 2 and then a back bet at 4, you've got the average in the middle. So the average price I've got those two bets at, a £40 bet and £80 profit, is effectively a £40 bet at 2-1, which of course is 3. So that's averaging. So finally for the book, guys, football trading is not difficult if you approach it correctly. The main key is going to be your good analysis. Okay, bad analysis or not putting enough effort into your research will end with negative results. You got to be patient and elect the right games. And you know that we had that fella, lovely fella in the football room, Gaz. He's disappeared now for a while. And he thought I was picking on him because I always used to mention that he was just betting on far too many games. He was just, that was his problem. He wondered why he had so many losses. I said, because you're virtually taking a position on every game that's being played. And that's punting, that's not trading. Part of the discipline, there's the goal now, just gone in. Isfara is 1-1. So the analysis has kicked a goal for you, mate, but we couldn't bet on it. Oh, that's annoying. I wish you hadn't mentioned it. No, that's okay. Big part of the discipline, guys, is knowing when to not trade. It's so tempting to put trades on, and you think part of the discipline is when the trading mindset book is when you do a trade, you stick to your rules, you don't bet, and the goal comes in. So next time you look at a game, you stick to your rules, not enough shots, you don't bet, and the goal comes in. Oh, the third time it happens, you think there'll be a goal, you look at the rules, not enough shots, but you think, bugger it, I'm going to do the bet anyway. The last two have won. I'm not going to miss out again. You do the bet, bang, no goal comes, you lose the money. So then you go on tilt because it seems no matter what you do, if you don't bet, there's a goal. If you do bet, there's no goal. It's just a nightmare. So you just got to stick to your rules. So, yeah, it's just, a lot of these impulsive bets will win. So, many people have been guilty of overtrading. They think if they don't bet on a game, they're missing an opportunity. I've been guilty of that when I first started. I looked at every game as a way to make some money. And I used to get upset when I'd take my kids to the pool for 2 hours. I'd think of all the races I was missing and thinking, well, I'm losing 10 quid for every 5 minutes I'm in this pool here. But I soon learnt you can't think of it like that. There's races as soon as you get home, and there's races tonight, and there's races tomorrow. It never ends. So if you miss a few races, you're not lost the opportunity of making money. So I used to look at every game as a way to make money and think that I've just got to get a goal here and I'll make money, and or not make money or not score a goal depending on what I'd done. But a lot of them win, but over time, a lot of them just don't. So it's like, just as you wouldn't go and buy a car or a house without thinking about it, you've got to try and do the same with your betting. A house is a long-term investment. A trade's a short-term investment. So be smart with it and always try and make sure you really feel in your head that you've got a better than 50% chance of winning this trade. Otherwise, don't do it. Or, like I say, there are exceptions. The under 2.5 goals market, I don't often think I've got 50% chance of landing that £1,000 trade. But I do often think there'll be a goal and it'll let me get out of it even or with a very, very small loss. But I don't go into that thinking, I got a better than 50% chance of winning that. They're the speculative trades and the ones what I call low risk, high reward. But last night, I honestly thought we had a better chance of 50% than getting 3 goals in the game. And again, if it wasn't for the weather and the red card, we probably would have got it. But that's football. That's variance. That's what happens. So overall, trading football is not difficult. You just got to be smart. You need to do the analysis or pay someone very good to do it for you, like a decent football trading services. There are some where you can follow experts on Twitter or just hang in our football room, follow Norbert, follow me, people that are making bets, and we'll put them in there for you free of charge just to go, there you go, we're doing that one, jump on. If you do that, you'll find that you're going to win more trades than you lose. And with good money management and a bit of discipline and sticking to your strategy, you're going to find that you can do it. Mate, Scott, I know you've made a joke there, but football trading, you can trade by the pool. You can go and lay by the pool with your laptop. As long as you look at the game and you're keeping an eye on it, then, yeah, it's obviously horse racing. You can't really trade by the pool. You got to be in a focused position. But football trading, you don't really need to watch the game. You should. It's better that you do. But it's obviously not something, on a weekend, I'll often analyse all my games on a Friday, and on a Saturday, I'll put the bets on at lunchtime, but then I'll go out with the missus and do something and not watch the games and just let them run. You can't see most of them anyway at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, but I'll just let them go. So we've got some cricket news there. The toss is going to be 1:30, so that's 6 minutes, and we've got play starting at 2 p.m. Now, my thoughts on the cricket briefly before you go is I think there's going to be a bit of an advantage in batting first. The wicket's a bit dry underneath. I don't think either team's going to want to be batting last on this. So I think the best thing for our lay of England would be if the West Indies can bat first. I think England will drift a little bit in price. And then if they can get through the first half hour, an hour, without losing any wickets, we're going to be in a monster position. Now, if England do bat first, they have got the most inexperienced top four that they've had since 1989. Okay, so we're going to still have a good chance. You still want to be in the trade if England bat first, because they could lose some early wickets and be banging trouble really quickly. So either way, we're happy to be against England at the start of this one. We can't lose a lot. It's only 37 ticks it can go down when you're laying at 137, and we might end up getting out at 115 or 120 or something. We'll see how we go. But look, that's all I'm going to batter you with for this morning. What I'll do is it took a little bit longer than I thought. So tomorrow morning, we're going to have a look at, I'll go and show you what we're going to have a look at. Open that up there. So we're going to go and have a look at Bet365. And yeah, we're going to go through this and have a look at some games and see what we've got. So this game that we were talking about, there's the second goal. There's been 6 shots on target. So I'd even bet if you wanted to go to the sports book. We'll see if it's on sports book. Let's go and have a look. Sports book. See if it's here. No, it's not even on the sports book. So that's disappointing. In play now. No, it's not even covered there. So it's only on Bet365. So yeah, you could go and I think there'll probably be another goal in this one. That's the sort of thing we're looking at. The other games that are on at the moment, this one's just started. There's been 2 shots on target in 17 minutes. So I don't think you'll be able to bet on that one either. It's probably not on Betfair. There's been no further goals in this 4-0, so that was a good decision not to take a bet there. They've ended up battering them at the end there, but it was still the right decision. So that's where discipline comes in. Even though a team's up 4-0, it doesn't mean there's going to be another goal. So that was a good decision to stay out of that one. Okay. Thank you very much for your time this morning. We'll leave it there. I'll catch you in Web Central after I've 100 Club. We'll go over to the 100 Club room, and I'll be in Web Central. I'll be in both rooms. So I'll catch you this afternoon. Going to do a bit of racing, keep an eye on the cricket, and of course, if any football trades come up, we've got a few games starting at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. We've got a whole heap of them starting between 3 and 4. So I expect there will be, I'm looking at about 20 or 30 games between 3 and 5 o'clock. So I'll be keeping an eye on them. There'll be loads of action this afternoon. So be ready to go, and I will catch you in the morning. Okay, thanks very much for your company. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.